Hi, so I'm Graham. I I'm an English major, and I've had a stutter since I was a kid. It kind of just like I remember that there was one specific day, and I don't know which, but there was one day where it came out, and it just like appeared out of nowhere. Um, and like I I think back now and think like, wow, that must have fucking shocked a lot of people. Like, oh my god, what just happened to that kid? But for me, like, I didn't even notice. It took years for people to be like, yo, you want to speed that up? You want to finish off that thought? You want to? All right, enough, enough, enough. Um, and it kind of it it drove me a little bit crazy, and I would be like, I remember there were some years where a friend would be like, whoa, dude, like you've been stuttering less than normal, and then they'd be like, oh wait, like a month later, oh wait, never mind, no, you're back at it, don't worry. um, and I would just be like staring at myself and being like, what's the cause, like what the fuck are you doing right now? Why can't you stop like string all of your sentences into like 10, 11, 12? And it's worse sometimes, it's better sometimes, but um, I think like that's what drove me to be an English major, because I realized that the more I wrote, um, the more confident I felt in what I say. And I think like writing for me has been um, a way to, in an auxiliary sense, like train my speaking, and or like my thinking, because in my mind, like thinking thinking is the fundamental like skill of both an orator and a writer and an advertiser and any other number of people. You're just like changing how you get it out there. Um, and so when I was a kid, I was like, all right, fuck this. Like, if I'm not gonna like be miserable in the process of learning how to speak and how to say what I want to say. So I took out a piece of paper, I took a pen, and I started writing. I wrote about what I thought about my friends. I wrote about some like cat I'd seen on the street. I looked a little funny, and just day by day, week by week, I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and then I found a computer, and that made it so much easier because I didn't have just like a stack of stupid thoughts lying all over. And then my mom wasn't angry at me for it anymore because I wasn't like messing up her space. And then I got into it, and I found that when I was like 13, I was writing at like a college level. I don't know what that means, but like I guess that's true. Um, and I kept at it because I felt like it was the way to turn my my condition into like a strength. Like, I stutter, so I feel more compelled to write, so that like while somebody who doesn't stutter may be this good at like saying what they think and this good at writing what they think, I shot up in writing, and like the speaking follows. So like I can't speak like a normal person, but I can speak like a writer. And I think that's something I spent a long time working on. And I mean, if you ask me, it just goes to show that like a condition being a condition in the sense that we take it socially is purely applicable in that context. So an autistic person is only autistic the way we think about it in the context of like non-autistic people being the ideal, which is not true. Like, I'm a little bit autistic. Like, I'm on a spectrum, but I have lots of friends who are just some of the most brilliant, caring, sympathetic, thoughtful individuals I've met in my entire life. And if they were born in the 1800s or the 1700s, they would have been tossed into a mental institution. So you think about that, and you think about how, like, you really can do exactly what you want as long as you're willing to think outside of the box. I think, like, the entire methodology of, like, how we handle a disorder is wrong, because we handle it differently from, like, she's blonde, she's brunette, like, that dude is tall, that one's short. Like, those we just take as superficial elements of, like, who somebody is. Like, well, that's not actually who they are, you know? But then as soon as it gets into cognition, then suddenly that defines the person, and, like, that is the person. And, like, an autistic person, like, I've seen people who keep their space because they're uncertain of how they'll act, or they'll like talk to them like a child, as they think they're too stupid to, like, understand. But I mean, that's just wrong, you know? Like, it's objectively not true, and I think it shows, like, the lack of sympathy and open-mindedness that we have in the present form of, like, where the world is. Because, like, we're only just now being able to say that an autistic person should not be locked up away from the public as, like, a mental case. Like, that's not progress. That's like the most fundamental expectation of, like, what we should be doing. And there's so much further to go. And if I can just say anything, I'd say, first of all, like, if you have a mental condition, there's nothing wrong with that. It is a superficial element of, like, the outer core of, like, how you're perceived, and it's not any different than, like, oh, I have big feet, you know, like, that's an element of how I'm perceived. But if I, like, think about my feet, I don't give a shit. Like, well, whatever, you know. I think in an ideal world, like, the way you think, the way you, like, it's also not the way you think, but, like, the way that your words come out should be as superficial and like unweighted as like your gait, like the way you walk, the way, I don't know, just there's too much emphasis put on something that really has no business being anybody else's business but your own. I think that's it.
That was fucking beautiful.